Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm William Chen.
I'm Max Tarrant.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
Each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. And this month we're discussing Get Out, which came out in the last few weeks, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, which came out in 1967. And the connection being that they are both films about a young white woman bringing home a black boyfriend to her parents and having dinner together and seeing what happens. So let's start with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. William, do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of this 1960s film?
Of course. So Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was directed by Stanley Kramer. Came out in 1967. And I think it's all in the title, really. As Jeremy was saying, just a young interracial couple invite themselves basically to the girl's parents' house and give them an ultimatum about whether they would accept or reject their union by the time the night is up. And then it's basically up to there. The guy's parents also get invited and dragged into the whole thing. And it becomes a stage play almost, where it's very limited. There's two sets, two locations, and a whole bunch of talking from a whole bunch of pairing up of characters.
Okay, thanks, William. Max, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of Get Out?
As we just said, Get Out was released in the last few weeks. It was the directorial debut of Jordan Peele, of Key and Peele fame. He also wrote the film. And it's basically, as we know, about a young African-American man and his white girlfriend. I find it funny saying interracial couple. It sounds so intense if you say interracial couple. But yeah, this black guy and his white girlfriend who are going to meet the white girl's parents. So obviously the same premise. She hasn't told her parents that he's black. And at first the parents just seem a bit awkward. But soon we get the feeling that something darker is going on.
Excellent. And I think it's worth saying that we kind of have this general rule with our podcast that the old film is up for grabs in terms of spoilers, but the current film, we will have a spoiler-free discussion. So, that's for those people listening in terms of knowing what we're going to say and not going to say. So who wants to kick us off? Which one should we start with?
Well, I think the first thing to say, of course, is Get Out has been getting heaps and heaps of both critical and civilian viewer acclaim for being not just an incisive, witty commentary on the sad state of current racial politics, but of course also it is a horror film, which of course it makes it very different from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And Jordan Peele has done an extraordinary job of basically melding, I think, probably the two most popular genres among cinephiles. It's almost guaranteed that everybody will go see it. The horror is not too horrific to my mind, but it's certainly there.
What genres are we talking?
Horror and witty, incisive social political commentary, I think. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody our age, and I will lump myself in with you younger gentlemen in this instance, everybody our age thinks, damn, this is the kind of film that we're interested in, you know what I mean? It satisfies us intellectually, it satisfies us in terms of comedically, and has wicked plot twists and a horror element to go with, you know.
Particularly attractive for millennials, I feel like.
I agree. I agree. I think that's really satisfying when you get those popcorn films or films that are just really enjoyable to just sort of sit back and let it take you along for the ride, but there is that twist of something more relevant going on in the background. And I remember when we had our discussion about our top films of last year, and we were talking about themes that captured our top 5 films, and I remember for myself, it was like all of my movies were quite escapist films, but had that real bite to it in terms of social commentary.
Yeah. I was just going to say, on the note of horror, it's quite interesting. The horror is actually not explicit in Get Out, until, I guess, the very end. But even so many of the situations, it's more a mundane sort of horror or the social anxieties. It's much more of a thriller, I would say, until it veers off in the very end. And I did find a lot of those emotions and those themes actually were reflected really well in the earlier film, I Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, especially when we look at Spencer Tracy's character and what a just horrible day he's been having for the entire movie. And how
him being, we should explain, him being the dad, the father,
yes.
the white father, who's initially surprised and possibly horrified that his beloved daughter, 23-year-old, has brought home a black man. But yep.
My favourite scene in the whole film is that when he kind of learns about this as well, because they act like nothing's they act like nothing's going on. They don't quite tell the father what's happened. And so Sidney Poitier is sitting there with them, and the father comes home. He's very busy. I don't know what he does. He's a CEO or something quite...
of a newspaper.
Newspaper. Very busy. Comes along, sitting down. Hi, how's it going? Oh, you're on the same flight. Okay, cool. That's lovely.
You're
that's
a
amazing.
doctor.
Oh, you're a doctor.
How
Great.
wonderful to meet
hey,
you.
oh, he's going to stay for dinner. That's fantastic. Okay, starts to walk off. Tries to walk off. And then finally, he gets the message. I can't remember who gives it to him.
Well, he says
No, he just
something's
senses
up.
it.
it's a double take, yeah.
It's a double take.
Yeah.
And he kind of after hanging around for about 5 minutes, he finally kind of goes, oh. And then he kind of steps back and just kind of tries to take it in, looks around, and kind of opens his eyes for the first time. I love that scene.
But not just his. There's so many great moments in that, and the guest is coming to dinner where the different people are confronted with this reality, and the opening with the mother, with Katharine Hepburn, and she doesn't even say much, and it's just all in her eyes, and you can tell that she's
those watery eyes.
Yeah. And it's not that she's disapproving; it's just that it's just so
shock.
complete.
It's physical shock.
Yeah, it's great.
It's interesting. I mean, the two films are not completely the same or comparable, but in the areas where comparison is warranted, it's really interesting that both sets of white parents consider themselves to be quite liberal and forward-thinking and not prejudiced. And obviously it's more glaring in the earlier film that Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy are very, it's nice to meet you, Doctor. But then when they realise this person might actually be coming into their family and marrying their daughter and procreating, that suddenly the prejudices rise rapidly to the surface. Like, it's great that he's an intelligent man, an educated man, and when they do the background check on him, he is, far superior to any ordinary type boyfriend, but all of a sudden it matters. Whereas in Get Out, the parents are automatically, we think, to start with, Catherine Keener and Bradley Whitford, are immediately, hey, it's really nice to meet you, I'm going to speak all street with you to show you that I'm a man of the people as well. And it's only later that things sort of start to unravel, isn't it?
Although that's the 2017-ness of it all.
I agree, yeah.
The idea that, the thing that Get Out is really skewering at the heart of it is the upper middle class liberal who's, we're not racist.
Yeah.
No, I voted for Obama. I would so again if I could.
That's
do
right.
So again.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. That mentality and that way of expressing themselves to people of other races. That is the center point of both, I would say, the horror elements and the comedy elements of Get Out.
And it's lovely how that develops, like, from the awkwardness of kind of a little meeting and the Obama chats, and then as it kind of develops, we're meeting these other people from their little world, and they're making very kind of offhanded comments that have kind of two meanings, that you're kind of like, I could take that in an extremely racist way, but you've kind of just covered your ass enough that I don't have to, like... And this character, Chris, is really adept at dealing with that, but he still has to take himself away. And that's what drags us into it as well, isn't it? Because we're going, you can so identify with this social awkwardness.
And I love in both films the naivety of the female lead or the female partner. And, they both are, and I don't want to spoil anything, but they both are so gung-ho in terms of this relationship.
It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And they no concept that there'll be any issue with bringing home a black boyfriend, and both of them, Sidney Poitier's character and Daniel Kaluuya, is his name?
Yeah.
Both of them are like, are you sure? Maybe they're the ones that
maybe
know.
you should tell them. That's right, because they've
is-
experienced the prejudice forever, so they know you don't be so. You're lovely, my love, but don't be so naive to think that this isn't going to be an issue.
And in both movies, in both cases, the guys are better at adapting to and responding to the circumstances, the casual racism or the discomfort around the fact that they are in just a completely different world.
But of course, they've had to be,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because these
They've
young
been
white
struggling
women haven't had to deal with this. So
Yeah.
it's a naive, well-meaning. No, it shouldn't be a problem. Whereas they're going, well, yeah, but my experience tells me that it has been, and therefore it might be again.
I love that scene as well in Get Out with the lead couple, when they are in the bedroom later on, and she sort of says, "Oh my gosh, I never would have thought that they would have talked to you like that. I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe they did this." And he's just sort of like, "Oh, come here," and they kind of have a kiss or whatever. But yeah, I think, like you're saying, William, that this is presenting the version of racism, and that it's like nobody wants to think of themselves as racist, but.
Well, it's sort of questioning, isn't it? Is it inherently racist for Bradley Whitford's dad character, whom I just adored for all his well-meaning awkwardness, or rather his unintentionally orcs comments, "Oh, look, here's a picture that might interest you, you black young man in my house. This is Jesse Owens, and here's an anecdote about a black man, and I'm going to call you my man, and I'm going to do all these street references to show that I'm down with you," and all that sort of... I mean, this is so fascinating to me as a white viewer, to go, "Oh, I spot all the references, and I can see why this is awkward, but I can also see he's being really well-meaning, and he's just trying to be on the same level, but is that racist?"
Yeah.
And I feel like, of course it kind of is, because it's acknowledging there is a racial thing here, you know.
And there's a disparity between positions of power as well.
But yet then you could argue, but I'm just trying to be inclusive, and I'm just trying to show that I'm not racist, and that I do know these things, and I am inclusive, and blah, blah, blah. So
I think one of the joys of watching Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was, I thought it was just a wonderful film, but also very sad in a lot of ways, because it just feels so relevant 50 years later, and that I think positioning the parents as these very well-meaning liberal people that were having an issue with this, that to me felt incredibly relevant for today. I mean, in my experience, my own personal experience in this country, coming to terms with, institutionalized racism and realizing that, oh my gosh, there's these massive blind spots that I've never had until, working in South Auckland. And then also talking with friends and family who are very similar to me, and there is a disconnect when I talk about certain things and I hear back points of view that I think, well, gosh, there's blind spots there as well. So yeah, to look at a film made 50 years ago, 1967, and think, oh wow, how far have we come? Is it just that we brush it under the carpet and like Get Out, we don't really talk about it front on?
But in some ways, in my head, I kind of conceptualize Get Out as a rewrite or a writing back to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And there's some great points of comparison. The obvious ones are there. And even to the extent that in the first few scenes, there's a replica pretty much of, hey, have you actually told your parents that I'm a black guy? This exact same scenario happens, and it really sets up the tension. But I think Peele, I could really imagine Peele sitting down and watching that movie and almost getting the idea for this film and just going like, you know what, this doesn't really show, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner doesn't really show any of the violence or any of the hardship or real tough issues in some ways around this. I think in some ways he's going, you know what, this needs to be more extreme. Somehow we need to make this more extreme. Because a lot of it's kind of soft in some ways.
I think it's a statement film, isn't it? I mean, you have, and the point I want to talk about is at the end of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, you literally have the patriarchy telling us what to think.
Yeah.
So the Spencer Tracy character has come to terms with the situation, and everybody's sitting, and I've got something to say, and everybody comes and sits down, and he pretty much makes this statement about what their life is going to be, and and if Sidney Poitier's father hasn't quite got there yet, well, that's okay. We'll work time to convince him.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Who's ready for dinner? And of course, that's the end of the film. But I just. And so that was the one part for me that was I was like, was this problematic? I was sitting there going like this. But then I thought about it, and I was like, for that film at that time, and even though it is late 60s, it's still a time of the civil rights movement's still very much happening.
I think the movie came out before Virginia v. Love, which is crazy. Like,
I'm not familiar.
Oh, you mean Loving?
The Loving, sorry.
Well, apparently it came out around the same time, and that was the court case that suddenly allowed interracial marriage. That was the film.
Didn't that pass though before the film got released? So there's a line in that film about about how this is going to be illegal in so many states, that by the time the film came out, it was legal by that point.
It may be, but definitely they were around at a similar
And
time.
Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive. He was killed when the film was still in the theatres, and they went in and cut that scene out. I don't know if you know that.
Right? No.
Yeah, but I guess I was thinking about it. I was like, this film is a statement, and actually having the white man declare his view on this was potentially speaking to the patriarchy, you know. And this is kind of like this is now accepted as part of the
new status quo.
Yeah, the new status quo. So even though it's problematic for me now as a 2017 viewer looking back, I was like, well, what other film significantly deals with this issue and then makes a statement?
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where you take the context of the time and you go, okay, what's a step ahead for them? Not what's a step ahead for us, but what's a step ahead for them. And in this particular issue, even though the black father gets shut out, so in some ways it's kind of undercutting its own message, it still at least has that kind of superficial message about it. And interesting you're saying about the Black Rights Movement, because of course in America there's recently been the Black Lives Matter movement, which apparently was not too far from when this film was starting to be made, and has been part of it. And there has been a bit of a resurgence in black American filmmakers recently, with films like, this is actually taken from a New York Times article, but Ryan Coogler's Fruitvale Station, Creed, Ava DuVernay's Selma, Denzel Washington's adaptation of Fences, 12 Years a Slave, Nate Parker's, the scandalous Birth of a Nation.
So the point is, of course, that you're making is that these are black filmmakers. These are black filmmakers making black stories. Yeah.
And then what I was interested around that was films. Was there a similar kind of swath of black cinema around at that time?
Well, it's blaxploitation, isn't it?
But that was slightly later, right?
Yeah, it's the 70s. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
what about?
That's quite interesting. If this was the only one, and it was kind of like.
Well, it was a significant one, wasn't it? It was a huge financial success. It was a huge Academy Awards success. So I think I think that these sort of stories are incredibly powerful in terms of shifting social perceptions. So I would be interested to see how much this film influenced people's views on interracial marriage.
Do you know what makes me uncomfortable about it, though, is... And I suppose they're damned if they did and they're damned if they didn't, but it interests me that they made Sidney Poitier's character about as intelligent and well-educated as any human can possibly be. And when there is that sort of the background check phone call, and he's been editor of this and that, and he's professor of this and that, and doctor and so on and so forth. And in a way it makes it more palatable, doesn't it, to accept an African-American man into your family if he's one of the good types.
Yes. They've really got to soften it up.
He's not a middle-class one, and God forbid he's actually off the streets or even a drug dealer or a rapper or something like that. And similarly, Chris Kaluuya's character in Get Out he's no hoodlum, but he isn't as hyperbolically sort of brilliant as Sidney Poitier's character.
Stew as Sidney Poitier.
Well, what about the fact that his father, he worked so hard to give him the opportunities that he had? It's like, I haven't even thought about this and put this in my notes, but in terms of that idea that you can get out of poverty if you just work hard.
Which,
and I'm not
which
assuming
character? Which film?
This is in Guess It's Coming to
Right,
Stay.
sure.
But it's like his father was working class, and he just had to work hard and sacrifice, and then that would actually mean that his son could achieve everything that he wanted.
But and yet maybe the message of showing Sidney Poitier in a cinema in 1967 as an incredibly successful black man, maybe that's the important part of the message.
Well,
so maybe I shouldn't be worrying about whether he could have been of lesser status and still lovable. But
there's a connection as well that they talk about their children, and I love that little joke where he says, they'll be the president of the United States, and then he says, maybe you should shift your expectations. Oh, well, I'll settle for Secretary of State.
Yes, exactly.
But Obama's parents were, he had a black father and a white mother, and they met in Hawaii, just like the couple in this film, and he would have been born at a similar time to their potential children were born. So there's this really lovely connection that that this film, foreshadowed what would come to pass.
That's quite interesting, that relationship between Poitier and his father. It makes me think that a lot of this kind of political change that was going on at the time would have been backpacking on a thrust of resilience, or a thrust of kind of defiance against the previous generation.
Oh yeah.
A lot of it is about like, oh well, our parents are old school and they don't know what's going on, and that kind of helps in so many ways for people to go, this is why we're doing everything different. It's like suddenly everything gets grouped under that, and really that's a major thrust of it, I think, is a reaction.
Definitely. I mean, especially in that scene where he does confront his father, and there's the famous line, you see yourself as a black man, I see myself as a man, and just that generation gap between ideals and what it means to be human for the both of them.
That was interesting though. That line for me did ring alarm bells, because it was fine in terms of illustrating the difference between him and his father. But it's like that whole thing of people who claim, I don't see colour, which is an inherently racist statement to make, because it's like, if what you're really saying is that there's an issue with colour and then I'm going to blind myself to it.
Well, similarly, what that invokes for me is the furore around O.J. Simpson, who O.J. Simpson famously didn't see himself as a black man and saw himself just as a man and a successful sports person, lived a white man's life. And that's how there was this really divisive support or lack of for him amongst the black community, because some would go, well, he's not even, he doesn't even like admit that he's a black man, let alone live like a black man. He's not working for black men, he's not trying to, support the African American cause. So is that denial, or is indeed that his right to go, you know what, I don't want this to be an issue, and so on and so forth.
And again, adding to the dynamics and complexities of this issue, another example, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which is another film. Some people said that Get Out is a combination of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Romero's...
And Stepford Wives. I mean,
and we've
Peel
talked
himself
about
has said this.
And we did talk about doing Night of the Living Dead. But interestingly, Romero said that was not a particularly political decision. That was actually the result of being colourblind. That he cast someone who was the best person to be the actor, and it had this lucky outcome.
That was the ending he wanted, I think he said.
Except that people then viewed it as a political move, right?
Yeah.
Well, particularly with Dawn of the Dead.
And I didn't read it like that.
Well, I didn't read it like that until I watched Dawn of the Dead, which has a black actor as the central figure in that film as well. And so I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is such a... I guess subversion of the action hero. Not that those films are particularly action movies, but still.
And when were they made?
So Night of the Living Dead is 1967. I'm pretty sure it's the same year. And then Dawn of the Dead is 10 years later, roughly.
Okay. So in terms of those black actors being at the forefront, again, that time might be the kind of tipping point.
I was just going to say, on the note of black people living in white people's world, did anyone see Keanu from last year?
No.
So it's also from Key and Peele. They don't direct it, but they wrote it. And it's fantastic. It's much more of a comedy than Get Out is, but it's all about how white black people do in a black person's world. And it's a crime movie. They're chasing after a drug lord's kitten. It's really silly, but so much of it is social commentary about how I guess white black guys are looked down upon by people who are from the hood and that kind of thing.
Well, that issue's been going on for hundreds of years, right? With is it Creoles?
Yes.
Creoles that are the ones the black people that were raised in white families and raised almost as white people, and had all the kind of mannerisms and understandings of a white person, and so they're kind of treated very different, and kind of, I think the understanding was that they basically backstabbed their compatriots
Or their forebears, sort of.
Yeah.
This kind of follows on. I'm desperate to make this point, and it does kind of follow on from this whole notion of what is an appropriate way to be as an African American, and this is exemplified in both films by the maid. Now, in I think her name is Tilly in the first film, and Tilly is very, very overt, and she's very much like, "What do you think you're playing at, son?" When she speaks to Sidney Poitier in the bathroom or wherever, you should know your place. You should know you don't get ideas above your station and all that, which is really interesting because it perpetuates that idea of well, I only ever expect to be a servant, and I don't see what you getting all high and mighty with all your degrees and trying to date this white woman that I've raised. How dare you? And then, of course, that's mirrored a little bit in Get Out. Of course, things then change and we realise why, and that's what makes Get Out so clever and funny and interesting. But initially, all we know is that the black maid in the white person's house, in Rose's family's house, is shocked and appalled that she's brought this young African-American Chris home, you know. And so that's really interesting to me.
Totally.
I don't really, I agree with you. I don't really have much more to add to that.
No,
I think
okay.
it's because I thought about the maids. I was thinking, what is the connection there? And there's definitely a statement. All I will say is that in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, I love the diagonal shot that happens in that scene. You know,
Yes.
the camera sweeps over.
It does. It
it's
goes
on a-
Dutch angle, doesn't
And
it?
so
For a whole
both
lot.
their heads are level on the screen before
Yeah.
it goes back.
That's
Yeah.
right. And then as she leaves the room, and storms out, doesn't she? And then it reverts,
Returns.
which is really curious.
It's very
filmmaking.
cool. I mean, I always love a Dutch angle. You know, I think it's great.
I love
Yeah.
a good Dutch angle.
Well, Danny
me.
Boyle.
Yeah, Danny Boyle.
Danny Boyle
Danny
films
Dutch-
all his films.
Dutch, yeah, that's right.
Joel Schumacher, like
Yeah.
half shots
Dutch
of touch
filmmaking.
angles.
But yeah, I just think that was interesting because, of course, the rest of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is very classical.
Yeah. Oh man, speaking of classical, those the painted backdrops. I mean, on an HD screen, it just looks so
It looks
fake.
awful, doesn't
And then
it?
people keep commenting like, "Look
Look
the
at
view."
San Francisco. Yeah.
There's little lights in the background of the cars going across the bridge. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, someone's back there pushing the light. Oh,
Yeah.
That's great.
So overall, how do you guys feel about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
Do you know, every time she said, "Is it because he's a Negro?" Part of me went, "Oh, crikey." I mean, it could have been worse, right? But I was just like, "Oh, God, oh, you're right, I get you, I get it."
People talked about that being a bit of a saying from the time that, I mean, I've got no problem with Negroes. I just wouldn't want one marrying my sister.
Right.
And it's a very similar issue here.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
I'd just like to say,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, one of the things that I got from watching Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was I did find what's her name, Joanna or Joey, to be really almost a prototypical like manic pixie dream girl.
Yeah.
How she's bubbly and peppy to the point that when her father tells her to shut up in the end, I was like, bravo.
Oh! But she seems,
that was great. I
but
loved
she's, look, I mean, it's not the most nuanced acting, I think, throughout the film, is it? You know, all the most nuanced sort of character work. So I think she just has to be the epitome of, I support this man no matter what,
I guess
and
so.
I will not let my parents tell me what to do. And I imagine, you know, I mean, 67 obviously was coming right in the thrust of women's lib and all that, but it's still a fairly progressive position for a young woman to take, isn't it? To defy the relationship, really good positive relationship she has with these doting parents, I suppose, and to say, well, I jolly well want this anyway, you know. But
Just thinking about the disconnect, I was thinking about going back to the point about Sidney Poitier's character talking to his father and just talking about the disconnect between the generations. I mean, you think about Graduate, which came out this year. I mean, that whole film is about that. How he feels so disconnected with his generation, and of course the irony that he sleeps with someone from that generation. But it just seems to be of that time when the teenage young people world is miles different from the war-torn world of their parents.
That's it, right? This is the people that were growing up who hadn't been through the war, right?
Absolutely. And
well,
I think about
they've been through the Vietnam War.
Not yet.
No, not yet.
Before
Is it? No, it's just
sort of
kicking off.
kicking off.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and then Get Out. I mean, I think about our current generation and how there's such more of a sense of what are we doing. You know, like our parents' generation was pretty set in stone with their life and where it was heading, but in our generation, there's this kind of uncertainty about what's going to happen, and I'm just trying to think if that's reflected in Get Out. I don't know.
Oh, I think that the problem with Get Out is there's this whole big reveal that we can't really spoiler.
Don't watch any of the trailers.
Yeah,
or any
my
of the trailers
gosh,
that pop
don't.
on YouTube. Oh my gosh, they spoil everything
The
in
Get
5
Out
seconds.
trailers are appalling. You're so right.
I didn't pick anything up though. I was quite happily just going along for the ride.
You'd seen the trailer?
I had, but I try not to think too much.
I hadn't seen the trailer, and then when I saw the trailer post-film, I was horrified at what I was so glad that I didn't know.
And Get Out, some of the performances, because I love Catherine Keener. And she has not a huge role in this film, but quite a significant role as the mother who has skills at hypnotist. She's a hypnotist therapist, and she wants to help him with his smoking addiction. She's just She's brilliant. It was interesting. There were some connections in this film, just visually, to being John Malkovich, and of course, she's a major part of that film.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
with how they use negative space, especially in these, I guess, fantasy sequences where you feel the entire camera syncing with the viewer, and it feels so good.
Yeah, that sync scene. Eh?
Yeah.
It's lovely. And also, I was really impressed by Alison Williams, who plays the
Rose.
girlfriend, because she's in Girls. I don't know if you ever watched the TV series Girls, but she's one of the key characters in that show. But I just thought she was really strong, and she is effectively the same character as Catherine Houghton from Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but.
The cheerleader almost.
Well, it is, but I actually feel like those sort of roles can be really undersold in terms of how difficult it is to pull off the kind of friendly, lovely girl. What was the word? What's the
manic pixie dream girl? Not quite that. Yeah,
pixie dream girl. I mean, to do it with some kind of sense of sincerity
and credibility,
right. to make it one-dimensional character realistic.
The same thing happens with any of those roles that is like the sort of airhead cheerleader role, but often has some heart behind it, which does happen in some films or stories. And again, it's really easy to pass those performances off because perhaps the role is frustrating. But the person, the actor behind it doing the work, often is can be doing a really good job. And I thought she was really credible.
I feel as though Jordan Peele has written a terrific film, and that there are no characters at all who are remotely one or two dimensional.
That's one of the best things about this film, right? It's how tight it is. And again, it says a lot for how you can have, if you've got a really good idea, I feel like you don't have to worry so much about all these other things going on, and you go, okay, we've got a good idea, doesn't need to be super flashy, don't need to throw in anything extra, let's just nail it down. And they do, they really nail it.
I would challenge that though, Max, because I think that to do that simplicity well, you have to work really, really hard in that writing process to I would assume that he would have had more things in there that he culled back and crafted back. To get to simple, it actually takes a lot of work.
That's true, yeah.
And so, and an idea is one thing. That's one half of it. But how you articulate that idea or how you roll that out is just as important.
I must say, Daniel Kaluuya was also really, really good in the role of Chris. I don't know if you guys have seen Black Mirror. Any of the episodes of that?
I have, but not with him.
Only a couple.
Oh, really? He's if you've seen the cyclist.
Is that him?
Yeah, that's him. The exercise bike episode. And
Which is when I stopped watching halfway through.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, I know him from that. I also know him from Sicario. He was the friend, the cop.
I don't remember him in Sicario, and I've seen that a couple times.
He was Emily Blunt's buddy who comes along for the ride, and he's just the observer for the whole thing. But
oh, right.
Yeah, I think he spoke an American accent for that, and he does a fantastic job just grounding the whole thing.
I love those moments where people say really awkward things, and he just kind of smiles and goes, like just really well balanced in terms of him navigating, I guess, the bias or maybe
the minefield of bias.
Yeah.
Do you know
Tiger Woods?
So
did you play golf?
And squeezing his arm.
So the interesting thing about Get Out, of course, is I think there's so much to be said for the whole kind of the lens that we all individually use to watch a film, and we are three non-black people, four in fact, non-black people sitting around this table having watched this film, and the fact that you don't need Chris's character to kind of give you a face at the camera to let you know, oh yeah, no, that was a bad thing to say. The fact that we hear, oh, Tiger Woods, and I the minute that when they were counting, and there's a particular scene where one of the characters is counting 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and I'm pretty sure I went audibly, oh, just because we're drawing these inferences through it all. We don't need any of the characters to be going, oh, that's inappropriate. Do you know what I mean?
You're right, and I think in some ways that speaks to, a lot of this discussion we premised on thinking, okay, where's the level of racism at, basically? Like, from going to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, we're like, okay, have things really changed? And that's one of the angles that we wanted to take on this discussion, right? And that is something. That is something that we are really identifying with the black character as our protagonist, and
When they're speaking to the cop at the beginning of the film, you know, it's a completely innocuous situation, innocuous, policeman, driver sort of situation, but it is so laden, and we all know so much about at least 20 years since, it's, 25 years since Rodney King, and so on and so forth. So, you know what I mean? There's so much.
And it also speaks to the literacy of, the viewers that, Peele is really playing on how adept the viewers are at picking up those little cues that are awkward, things that are so popular these days in pop culture to use, these little awkward moments.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's a whole nother podcast and several books of essays to be written about the difference between a white Quentin Tarantino making an ostensibly black messaged movie and a black Steve McQueen and a black Jordan Peele making message movies and things, and I guess we'll just have to backburner that.
Well, I mean, it's probably worth pointing out as well, and you've already said it, that none of us are black.
Well, we're not even American.
No, so it is very presumptuous of us, I think, to be making some of these statements, but
But no,
it's
I don't.
better to talk about it than
to
not
be
talk
fair,
about
I
it,
don't think it is presumptuous, but I do think everything needs to be acknowledged through our lenses. And that's kind of what I was saying before, And so this is the thing. As a let's just go young white woman. Is it interesting, or is it to be expected in 2017 that I would get a whole lot of those references and think certain things were rather on the nose, or that certain things were kind of okay, or whatever,
I guess time will tell, won't it, in terms of how much this film will have an impact, like it always does with every film, It'd be interesting to see the success of this movie, what other films come out of this.
And also what other films that Jordan Peele has yet to come up with. He apparently he was slated to direct Akira, which is just sounds like a horrible idea all around. He declined that, saying he just has so many original...
Is that the anime with the motorbike?
Yes, that is the
amazing film, yeah.
Yeah, and no need of remake for that one. But yeah, he told people that he has just so many cool ideas that he wants to get up on screen, which is really, really exciting. I think it's going to be a good time.
I do sort of, I wonder whether, and I haven't extensively researched him or read his interviews about Get Out or anything, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if, actually, first and foremost, he wants to do witty, incisive social commentary, but that it's also about having a laugh. Because when I think back to my most favourite Key and Peele sketch, which will always be Mr. Garvey's substitute teacher, calling the role the role of the ordinary names, Jacqueline, Timothy and whatnot, and Aaron, Balake and all that, and I could watch that sketch over and over and over, and it's partly, listeners, because I work in a school with predominantly South Auckland kids who have similar sorts of names. So it's partly acknowledging that, but it's also partly because it's a very, very witty subversion, or rather, a twist on what we're used to. And that's the same with Get Out. There's this very witty subversion and twist on sort of the, racial situation that we're used to and that sort of thing. That, to me, is its strength and what makes it so interesting. And it'll be very interesting, for me at least, to see whether this spawns a whole not genre, but a whole stream of films, or whether people go, well, no, actually, he's just done that, it was brilliant, and anything more would just be a copy,
So, team, final thoughts. William.
Okay, well, it's really interesting because both movies, as we've been saying, are so linked, and I think that's intentional from Get Out's perspective. The wind is really, really blowing. Okay, it's great to see how times have changed since the 60s and 70s, and whereas Guess Who's Coming to Dinner has a very direct way of speaking, and Max, you used the word didactic, and I feel that it's a good word for describing this. The message is very, very much there, it's very strong, and the patriarchy, Spencer Tracy, actually spells everything out for you at the very end. It's just the way of doing it, whereas in 2017, everything is so much more, there's more nuance. I don't know if that's a better thing or a worse thing. In my mind it is, but other people might disagree. It's just really, really cool to see how people are approaching what's ostensibly the same issue and the same problem with like greatly varying degrees of tact and of like anger and of impact.
I love the improvement of anger in this, where it's so much more forceful. I'd say my last words are that this, in some ways, felt to me like a cure for wellness. In the sense that there's a character that goes away and has to deal with a crazy situation, and things get crazier and crazier. But at least in this film, there was a fantastic point underwriting it, and I loved that.
Which film? Get Out.
Get Out.
Yeah, all I have to say is Get Out is a tremendous film. To me, we didn't even touch on all the sort of the horror tropes. And I guess we couldn't have done that without
more genre
spoiling.
elements,
But the genre elements I just absolutely adore, and I think everybody should see Get Out. I don't even think if you don't like horrors, I don't even think it matters, because it's not that horrific. That's not its point. And it's just so witty and clever that I think everybody ought to go see it.
I agree. I loved Get Out. I also just loved Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I was really surprised how much I loved Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. It just sort of flew by. I was sick when I watched it. I was sick when I watched it, and it was a great 2 hours or whatever it was. And yeah, Get Out. I couldn't suggest it more. It's definitely in my top films of the year so far. And yeah, this has been a great 2 films to compare. Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, through Apple Music Podcasts, or even on YouTube. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, which are also great places to let us know what you think this episode is like, or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, and until then, ka kite anō.